On Christmas Day 2021, the James Webb Space Telescope was launched into deep space. Thanks to its incredible instruments, it will be able to observe faraway celestial bodies in a way that was previously unthinkable.
But this isn't a story of rockets and space probes. Rather, it's about another astronomical observatory. Welcome to Nabta Playa, humanity's oldest connection to the stars. Our story begins in the year 1968. It was the time of rock and roll, the summer of love, and the Vietnam War. In Egypt, the great temple of Abu Simbel was being carefully dismantled, piece by precious piece, and relocated elsewhere. The Aswan High Dam was being constructed to divert the course of the River Nile. The huge water reservoir the engineers sought to create would inevitably flood the valley.
The flooding threatened the temple of Abu Simbel, hence its relocation. But what about all the archaeological treasures yet to be discovered? Enter our heroes, the Combined Prehistoric Expedition. This group traveled all around the Nile Valley in search of forgotten treasures to save from the flood. Eventually, they started to widen the range of their explorations until something happened in 1973. They were in the desert, far from the River Nile. The landscape was barren and featureless, offering no road nor any landmark. They parked their jeep in an unassuming place to take a bathroom break. They suddenly noticed something. Some big stones were lying on the surface. They were clearly in what was once a lake bed. If those stones were natural formations, water erosion would have destroyed them. So, who had put them there? The archaeologists had found a needle in the haystack, as the stone circle of Nabta Playa had just been discovered. Located 800 kilometers south of Cairo, this is the oldest astronomical observatory as of yet. It was built more than 6,000 years ago. Essentially, it can be considered Egypt's Stonehenge.
Let me add some perspective to this abstract talk of chronology. Let's put the construction of Nabta Playa on a timeline. It was built around the year 4500 BC. That means the assassination of Julius Caesar is closer to our days than to the time of Nabta Playa. It is indeed an ancient place, but who built it and why? The answer to these questions is found in the mists of time.
Over 10,000 years ago, the cold and dry ice age ended. North Africa was very different from today, as the equatorial monsoons had migrated northway. The result was the blooming of the Saharan desert. Alright, the term blooming may be too over the top. Let's think it over. These days, my country, Italy, receives about 900 millimeters of rain per year. Meanwhile, Egypt only receives around 20. When the blooming of North Africa happened, Egypt's annual rains increased to around 150 millimeters. Not quite the Green Sahara. Yet, despite the very dry state of affairs, the local peoples were no doubt thankful they could bless the rains down in Africa. And yes, I know, I totally had to put that Toto song here. But I don't want a copyright strike. Sorry. Anyway, when the monsoon season hits, lakes fill up, becoming temporary oases of life. These lakes are called playas. Eventually, they dry out on account of evaporation. The people of this region hunted animals around these short-lived oases for millennia. But slowly, they completely changed their lifestyle. Enter the aurochs, the extinct ancestor of our cows. They were bigger than any cow you'd ever dream of. The peoples of the Sahara domesticated these huge animals and used them as walking larders. They'd rarely butcher the aurochs for meat, preferring instead to drink their milk and draw their blood for sustenance.
But wait just a minute. What does all these blood-drinking, milking and hanging out by the playas have to do with our ancient space observatory? Please, do bear with me.
Cattle were vital to this early farming society. They were not merely considered a food source, but also were regarded as sacred. This prehistoric cattle-oriented religion would have a considerable influence on the future Egyptian culture. According to ancient Egyptian mythology, the Milky Way is a heavenly pool of cow milk. But a major goddess of the ancient Egyptian religion was depicted as a bovine, like in this stone palette where she's surrounded by stars. Why did I create this weird connection between cattle and stars?
Let's return to the main topic of this video, Nabta Playa. For at this spot, 4,000 years before the building of the stone circle, it hosted a ceremonial center. It was frequented by auroch farmers who lived in small and widely dispersed communities. Just before the rain season, they gathered. Hundreds of people showing up to reaffirm their social bonds, the year's highlight. They traded, dispensed justice, celebrated weddings, formed alliances between families, and generally hung out. Hundreds of ancient harps have been found surrounding Nabta Playa. It really must have been something like a prehistoric Woodstock meets marketplace. And yet, the most important role these gatherings had was religious in nature. Aurochs weren't normally butchered, yet around Nabta Playa many cattle bones have been found, evidence of a culture in which cattle sacrifices were essential.
7,300 years ago, someone sacrificed a calf. They carefully buried it in a clay circle topped by a wooden roof. The small structure was covered with rocks. The end result being an 8-meter diameter, 1-meter tall mound, located in a wadi, which is a small desert valley subject to flash floods. Cattle were their most vital resource. So why they were sacrificing them? While we can know what they truly thought, it's obvious that, to them, cattle were life bringers. But these farmers and their cows alike were utterly at the mercy of the rain. In similar situations, some cultures have even sacrificed their own children. So it's obvious that the sacrifice of cattle represented a heavenly trade. The life of a calf in exchange for life-giving water from the heavens. Success brings success, and assuredly, the ritual center grew. Returning briefly to the combined archaeological expedition, our intrepid fellows were uncovering an enormous rock shaped like a cow. The megaliths were a cosmic calendar. It enabled to predict the arrival of the summer solstice, and with it, the rains. The monsoon would completely flood the monument, which was located in the very center of one of those seasonal lakes. A powerful sight indeed. Imagine the reflection of the stars on the mirror-like surface of the lake, and the joy of feeling blessed by the heavens. As soon as the seasonal lakes filled up, the nomads left Nabta Playa behind and set off with their cattle herds. They started to travel across the arid desert, lake by lake, with their cattle grazing and fattening. Though they had left their cosmic observatory, they still watched the stars, as it was their only mode of navigation in the ever-changing desert. Even more impressive is the fact that there was no clearly visible pole star, so they had to be very competent stargazers indeed.
No pole star? Well, you see, while the Earth rotates on its axis, the axis is not fixed, as it rotates slowly, completing a cycle in 26,000 years. This process is known as the Great Year. Living in the present day, Polaris is plainly aligned with the North Pole, so finding the North by stargazing is quite easy. The star aligned with the North Pole changes every 2 millennia. In the heyday of Nabta Playa, the pole star was Tau Hercules, which is a very dim star. And so, navigation by stars was harder, and people of the desert obviously had to memorize a lot of star formations.
5,000 years ago, the rains stopped. The monsoons shifted back and the Sahara became a dry and lifeless place. Had the people of the desert incurred in the wrath of the heavens? Desperate, they migrated towards the Nile, and Nabta Playa was abandoned. But though Nabta Playa had been forgotten and was now covered by sand, its erstwhile people flourished alongside the river Nile. Herders turned into farmers. They dug canals, they constructed cities, they fought wars. And in due time they created the Kingdom of Egypt. The descendants of the people of Nabta Playa would build such splendors as the pyramids. And yet, though it might appear crude, Nabta Playa is itself a marvel of engineering, second to none.
When we gaze upon the great wonders uncovered by the James Webb Space Telescope, we should remember that, like us, the people of the past scoured the stars, searching for answers. And who knows what wonders humanity will build in the future, owing to stargazing.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. You should consider liking and subscribing.
Keep the shutter down in this room.
Okay, sorry. See you next time, in the mists of time.